The fluorescent lights of the Northside Community Center hummed a tired, electric drone, a sound that had become the unofficial anthem for the Wednesday night fitness class. Inside the warm, stuffy room, the air was thick with the scent of sweat, rubber mats, and cheap air freshener. For the group of 10 men laughing and grunting through their workout, it was just another chance to show off. They were the regulars, the self-appointed kings of the gym, and their court jester had just arrived. Her name was Lena. She was a slight woman, maybe 5'4", in her worn-out sneakers, with a quiet demeanor that made her practically invisible in a room full of booming egos. She wore an old, faded gray t-shirt and loose-fitting sweatpants. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and then she kept her eyes down as she unrolled her mat in the farthest corner of the room. To the casual observer, she looked like someone who was trying to shrink, to take up as little space as possible. To the men, she was a punchline. "Well, well, look who's here for her evening stroll," Mark, a thick-necked man in his early 30s, announced with a smirk. He was the group's unofficial leader, loud, confident, and fueled by a cocktail of protein shakes and arrogance. He was midway through a set of bicep curls with a weight that was too heavy, his form a jerky, desperate struggle. His friend Dave let out a snort. "Careful, Mark. She might show you how to do a proper jumping jack. Wouldn't want you to pull a muscle." The other men within earshot chuckled, their eyes flicking towards Lena with a mixture of amusement and dismissal. And Lena didn't react. She simply began her own warm-up, a series of slow, controlled stretches that looked deceptively simple. She moved with a fluid grace that was at odds with the jerky, high-impact motions around her. It wasn't the stretching of a casual gym-goer. It was the deep, purposeful limbering of a highly tuned machine. But to them, it just looked like a timid woman too scared to pick up a real weight. The torment was a low-grade, persistent hum. It came in the form of loud, pointed conversations about real athletes versus cardio bunnies. It came in the form of exaggerated groans when she stepped onto the only available treadmill, forcing her to wait. It came in the way they'd accidentally let their weights drop a little too close to her mat, the loud clang making her flinch slightly, which they found hilarious. "Hey, my sweetheart," another man, Chris, called over. He was the youngest of the group, eager to impress the older guys. "If you need a spot, I'm your guy. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself with that, He gestured vaguely at her 2-pound dumbbells. "Heavy lifting." This time, a few of the men openly guffawed. Lena finally looked up. Her eyes, a calm, clear gray, met Chris's for a brief moment. There was no anger in them, no hurt. Just a profound, unsettling calm. It was the look of someone assessing a situation, cataloging a threat, and finding it utterly non-existent. She looked back down and continued her routine. The silence that followed her gaze was heavier than their laughter. The breaking point came on a humid Thursday evening. Mark, having just finished a set of pull-ups with an audience, was buzzing. He swaggered over to the heavy bag that hung from a steel beam in the corner of the room. It was his favorite prop. He'd pummel it for a few minutes, the satisfying thwump of his fists drawing the admiration of the others. "All right, boys, time for some real work," he boomed, wrapping his hands with practiced flair. He threw a few lazy jabs, then wound up for a powerful roundhouse kick. His form was all power, no control. He hit the bag with a loud smack, but the force of his own momentum nearly spun him around. He stumbled, catching himself on a nearby bench, his face reddening with a mix of exertion and embarrassment. Lena was closest to the bag, doing a series of lunges. Mark's eyes landed on her, a convenient target for his redirected frustration. "What are you looking at?" he snapped, his voice laced with aggression. "Oh, you think you can do better?" The room went quiet. The other men turned to watch, grinning in anticipation of another round of pick on the PT girl. Lena stopped her lunge and slowly stood up straight. She looked at the swaying, heavy bag, then back at Mark. She spoke for the first time, her voice soft, almost gentle, but it cut through the silence like a blade. The bag is for training, not for tantrums. For a second, there was stunned silence. Then a wave of jeers and laughter erupted, but this time it was directed at Mark. His face burned a deeper shade of crimson. Humiliated in front of his friends, he took a step towards her, his fists clenched. "Oh, a comedian?" he snarled. "Since you're such an expert, why don't you show the class how it's done? Or are you all talk?" He gestured grandly to the bag. "Come on, show us. 1 round. Let's see what you've got, Rhonda." Dave joined in, sensing the shift in mood. "Yeah, give us a demo. We promise we won't laugh. Much." Lena simply looked at them. She saw the cruelty in their eyes, the need to put someone down to feel bigger themselves. She had seen that look before, in different settings with much higher stakes. She saw it in the eyes of arrogant recruits on their first day, the ones who thought they were untouchable. She always found it tiresome. With a soft sigh, she reached down and picked up a small gym bag she always kept by her mat. It was old and faded. The men watched, their jeers fading into puzzled curiosity. Lena unzipped the bag and reached inside. She didn't pull out a water bottle or a towel. Her hand emerged, holding a heavy, matte-black diving knife in a sheath. Mark's smirk vanished. And the knife wasn't a prop. It was a piece of military-grade equipment, worn from use, the handle molded to a specific hand. She placed it on the floor next to her bag. Next, she pulled out a pair of coiled steel handcuffs. Then, a small, waterproof pouch. From the pouch, she carefully removed a single item. A worn leather coin, the size of a large poker chip. She held it up, not to show them, but to look at it herself for a moment. On one side was the emblem of the United States Naval Special Warfare Command, the spearhead trident. On the other, the crest of the Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL BUD/S training program. She didn't say a word. She just held it up for a long, silent second, letting the faded gold lettering catch the harsh fluorescent light. The silence in the room was now absolute, a vacuum where their arrogance used to be. And the coin wasn't just a token, it was a statement. It was proof of a world they couldn't even imagine. It was worn by the men and women who forged the world's most elite warriors. Dave's mouth was hanging open. Chris looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Mark just stared, his face draining of all color, his earlier bravado a distant, shameful memory. Lena put the coin away, re-zipped her bag, and stood in front of the heavy bag. She didn't wrap her hands, she didn't bounce on her toes, she didn't snarl or posture. She just planted her feet, shoulder-width apart, her weight perfectly balanced. Then she moved. It wasn't a workout. It was a dissection. She threw a jab. It wasn't fast, it was economical. It traveled the shortest possible distance from her shoulder to the bag, striking it with a sharp, precise thwack that sounded completely different from Mark's sloppy punches. Then a cross, then a hook. Each strike was a lesson in physics, a perfect transfer of energy from the ground, through her core, and into the bag. The bag, which had swayed violently under Mark's assault, now shuddered in place, absorbing blows that seemed to land with 10 times the force. She increased her pace, a blur of controlled violence. Punches flowed into elbows which flowed into knees. She dropped into a stance and unleashed a series of kicks, low, mid, high, each one precise enough to hit a postage stamp. She wasn't fighting the bag. She was having a conversation with it, and the bag was losing. In under a minute, she stopped. She wasn't even breathing hard. Her face was calm, her expression unchanged. She walked back to her mat, picked up her bag, and then slung it over her shoulder. As she walked towards the door, she paused beside Mark. He was frozen, a statue of shame. Without looking at him, she spoke, her voice quiet enough for only him to hear. "The bag is a tool. You don't beat it, you learn from it. The same way you should learn to see the person in front of you instead of just what you want to see. She finally turned her gray eyes to him. Your form is terrible. If you want to get better, stop showing off and start paying attention. She walked out of the community center and into the warm, humid night, leaving behind a room full of men who felt smaller than they ever had in their lives. The heavy bag still swung, a slow, gentle pendulum marking time in the deafening silence. They had seized her, mocked her, and tried to diminish her. And in a single minute, she had shown them exactly who they were dealing with. She hadn't been the punchline, she had been the whole story,